Welcome to our deep dive into Cambodia.
Yeah.
We've got a collection of excerpts from scholarly works and reports here.
Right.
And we're going to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge about this incredible country for you.
All right.
It's like a crash course on Cambodia's history, politics, economy, and society.
Right.
Especially useful if you're planning to interact with Cambodia in some way.
That's right. And we've got some intriguing stuff to uncover.
Okay.
For example, did you know that Cambodia nearly vanished as a nation in the 1800s?
Really?
Due to pressure from its neighbors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We'll also get a glimpse into life under the Khmer Rouge, including their radical social engineering.
Interesting.
And how the country's economy has been shaped by everything from ancient irrigation to modern conflicts.
Okay, so let's set the stage geographically first.
Right.
Cambodia is nestled in Southeast Asia and is dominated by the Mekong River and the Tunnel Sap Lake.
Okay.
What's fascinating about the Tunnel Sap is that it changes size dramatically depending on the season.
Exactly.
And
that fluctuating lake is a huge deal for Cambodian life.
Yeah.
Most of the country is low-lying and relies heavily on the Tonle Sap for agriculture, making them vulnerable to droughts and floods.
Right.
It's a powerful example of how geography shapes daily life.
Speaking of vulnerabilities, this is where it gets really interesting. Back in the 1800s, Cambodia almost got absorbed by Vietnam and Thailand.
Right.
It was that close to disappearing.
I know.
But thankfully, the French stepped in and made it a protectorate.
Right.
Of course, that came with its own set of complexities. But before we dive into the French colonial period, let's rewind a bit further back in time to the Angkorian period.
The Angkorian period, from the 9th to the 15th centuries, was a time of immense cultural and political power for Cambodia.
Wow.
Think of the magnificent temples of Angkor Wat. They're a legacy of this era.
Amazing.
But even Angkor eventually declined, and you can see how geography played a role in that, too.
Right. I read about that.
Yeah.
The deterioration of their sophisticated irrigation system, combined with pressure from the Thai and internal conflicts, really weakened them. It's fascinating how something like irrigation can have such a major impact on a civilization.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of different aspects of a society, from technology and infrastructure to political stability.
Okay.
And that brings us back to the 1800s and the near extinction of Cambodia under pressure from Vietnam and Thailand. That immense pressure is what ultimately led to the French protectorate.
Okay.
It was a case of choosing the lesser of two evils.
So the French colonial period, as you mentioned, was a mixed bag.
It was.
They developed some infrastructure, like roads and railways, but also exploited Cambodia's resources for their own gain.
Exactly. And that exploitation had a lasting impact. They entrenched foreign powers in the Cambodian economy. Creating problems that persisted long after they left.
Wow.
It's important to remember that colonialism had a profound and enduring impact on Cambodia's development.
Okay, so after the French, we get to King Sihanouk, who ruled for decades. He was a complex figure trying to navigate the Cold War while maintaining Cambodia's independence. He actually managed to stay neutral for a while.
He did.
Playing the U.S., the Soviets, and the Chinese off against each other.
Talk about a balancing act.
I know.
But as you can imagine, that couldn't last forever.
Of course not.
Sihanouk was eventually ousted in a coup in 1970.
Okay.
And Cambodia got dragged into the Vietnam War.
Oh, wow.
This period was incredibly destructive, with the U.S. bombing Cambodia heavily.
Wow.
And the country descending into civil war.
And this leads us right into one of the darkest chapters in Cambodian history. The Khmer Rouge regime. Most people know about the horrors of the killing fields, but our sources delve deeper into the mechanics of this horrific period. For instance, did you know that many key Khmer Rouge leaders were actually educated in France?
It seems almost unbelievable, isn't it?
It is a chilling irony, isn't it?
These were elite students who became ultra-radical revolutionaries. And their education in the West did play a role in shaping their ideology. For example, they were exposed to certain French intellectual and political movements that emphasized radical social change and anti-colonialism. But they took these ideas to dangerous extremes.
Wow. I didn't realize their education had such a direct connection to their ideology. And what about the emptying of Phnom Penh?
Right.
That wasn't just about cruelty, was it?
Absolutely.
There was a calculated strategy behind it.
It was a calculated move to eliminate perceived threats and consolidate control. The Khmer Rouge were obsessed with creating a completely agrarian society. And they saw cities like Phnom Penh as hotbeds of capitalism and opposition. So they forced millions of people into the countryside to work on collective farms, believing this would purify the nation and lead them towards true communism.
So they were trying to create a sort of utopian agrarian society.
They were.
But their social engineering went even further than that, right? Didn't they completely upend traditional Cambodian life?
They created 5 distinct classes based on perceived loyalty to the revolution and deliberately upended traditional Cambodian life. Family structures, religious practices, education, everything was targeted for radical transformation. They wanted to erase the past and build a new Cambodia based on their own twisted vision.
It's hard to grasp the scale of the changes they imposed.
It is.
And the language they use is just chilling.
I know.
They had euphemisms for their atrocities like invitation for death and memory sickness for anyone who dared to remember the past. It's almost like they were trying to control reality itself.
That's a very astute observation.
I don't know about that.
The Khmer Rouge were obsessed with control, and language played a key role in their attempt to reshape Cambodian society. They wanted to eliminate any thought or memory that contradicted their ideology. This control extended to their economic policies as well.
So let's delve into their economic aims. It was all about this radical back to agriculture model, right?
It was.
They essentially wanted to create something that had never before in history existed, as one of their leaders put it. But obviously this utopian vision failed miserably.
It did.
Leading to widespread famine and death.
Yes. And that failure was rooted in several factors. Their agricultural policies were based on unrealistic expectations and a lack of understanding of Cambodia's environment and farming practices. They also abolished money and private property, disrupting traditional economic systems and leading to widespread shortages. Their attempt to collectivize everything and control every aspect of the economy was ultimately unsustainable and disastrous.
So after this devastating period under the Khmer Rouge, Cambodia enters the Post-Khmer Rouge era. A whole new story of rebuilding and recovery begins. What happened next?
Well, after the Vietnamese invaded and ousted the Khmer Rouge in 1979, Cambodia was occupied by Vietnam for much of the 1980s. They set up a government known as the People's Republic of Kampuchea, or PRK, and began the long and challenging process of rebuilding.
Rebuilding after such devastation must have been incredibly difficult.
It was. What were some of the major challenges they faced?
Cambodia faced immense challenges on multiple fronts. The economy was in ruins, and agriculture remained the dominant sector, but even that was struggling. One detail from our sources that I found intriguing was the concept of solidarity groups, where families were supposed to work together collectively on agricultural projects. However, there's debate about how much of that was truly collective versus forced labor under the PRK's control. So even the attempts at agricultural revival were complicated by the political realities of the time. What about other sectors of the economy? Were there any attempts to revive industry?
There were, but those attempts were limited by the extensive damage from the war and a lack of resources. Cambodia was essentially starting from scratch in many ways. It's a testament to their resilience that they were able to make any progress at all. But the economic situation remained extremely precarious. And this precarity was further complicated by the complex political landscape.
Let's dive into that political landscape then.
Absolutely.
It sounds like it was a tangled web of different factions and interests.
It was.
Can you give us an overview?
On paper, the PRK had a fairly elaborate structure with a constitution, a national assembly, a council of state, and a council of ministers. However, the reality was that the Kampuchean People's Revolutionary Party, or KPRP, held all the real power.
So
think of it as a one-party state with the KPRP controlling every lever of government.
So even though there were these institutions in place, the KPRP was really calling the shots.
There were.
And were there any resistance groups operating during this time?
Yes. And understanding these resistance groups is key to grasping the complexities of Cambodian politics in the 1980s. We're not just talking about who they were, though it's important to know the key players, the Khmer Rouge remnants, the non-communist Khmer People's National Liberation Front, or KPNLF, and the royalist Phen Phon Sien Pek, which stands for the Front National Uni pour un Cambodge indépendant, neutre, pacifique et coopératif. But why they formed and what their aims were.
So a mix of ideologies and goals driving these resistance groups. It sounds like a recipe for conflict.
It was. So they had different ideologies, different goals, and even internal conflicts within the groups themselves. For instance, Sun San's leadership of the KPNLF was constantly challenged, illustrating the fragmentation even within these opposition movements. And of course, the search for peace in this period was incredibly difficult. With so many factions, with such vastly different aims. Finding common ground must have seemed impossible.
And what about the role of international actors in all of this? Were they trying to mediate or influence the situation?
Yes, international actors like ASEAN, which stands for Association of Southeast Asian Nations, were involved in trying to mediate and find a path towards peace. But it was an incredibly complex situation with a tangled web of competing interests. You have the Khmer Rouge receiving support from China, the KPNLF getting backing from the U.S. and some ASEAN countries, and Sihanouk playing his own diplomatic games with various international powers.
It sounds like Cambodia became a stage for Cold War proxy conflicts.
That's a very apt way to put it.
With the Cambodian people caught in the crossfire.
It was a classic Cold War scenario playing out in this Southeast Asian nation. And the human cost was immense.
It's a heartbreaking reality of how international politics can impact the lives of ordinary people.
It is.
Absolutely.
But amidst all of this political turmoil and conflict, Cambodian society was also trying to rebuild and reclaim its identity.
That's an important point. It's easy to get lost in the political and military narratives, but it's crucial to remember that they were ordinary Cambodians trying to rebuild their lives and communities amidst all of this chaos.
Exactly.
What can you tell us about Cambodian society during this period? Did they manage to preserve any aspects of their culture after the Khmer Rouge's attempt to erase it?
It's remarkable how resilient Khmer culture proved to be, even after the Khmer Rouge's brutal attempt to destroy it.
That is amazing.
Family life remained central, with the nuclear family as the bedrock of society. Traditional gender roles persisted, and there were fascinating customs like pre-wedding bride service, where a man would work for the bride's family before marriage as a sign of commitment.
So even though the Khmer Rouge tried to dismantle traditional structures, certain aspects of Khmer culture endured.
They did.
What about religion? How did that fare during this period?
Theravada Buddhism, despite being brutally suppressed by the Khmer Rouge, remained the dominant religion in Cambodia. It played a vital role in education and daily life, providing a sense of continuity and stability for many Cambodians seeking to rebuild their lives.
It's a testament to the enduring power of faith and tradition.
It is.
It's inspiring to hear how Cambodians held on to their faith amidst such adversity. But Cambodia wasn't entirely homogenous in terms of religion.
No.
Weren't there other religious groups present as well?
Yes, and recognizing that diversity is important. Besides Theravada Buddhism, there were animistic beliefs, particularly among the Khmer Rouge, the various hill tribes living in the more remote regions of the country. There was also a small Christian community and the influence of Chinese religion, especially among the ethnic Chinese population in Cambodia. This religious diversity adds another layer of complexity to Cambodian society, something that's often overlooked.
It's a good reminder that even within seemingly homogenous societies, there's often a lot of diversity hidden beneath the surface.
There is.
But we can't talk about Cambodia without addressing the security situation, especially given its turbulent history. Let's take a deeper look at that.
Absolutely.
Cambodia's military history is a roller coaster ride.
It is.
Starting with the French-trained forces Armées Royales Khmer, or FARC. Then Sihanouk's balancing act with U.S. military aid, and the disastrous impact of the Vietnam War spillover on the Cambodian army, known as FANG, which stands for Forces Armées Nationales Khmer. But let's focus on the post-1979 situation, when the Vietnamese were in control. This is where the KPRAF, or Kampuchean People's Revolutionary Armed Forces, the new Cambodian army, was formed. So the KPRAF was essentially built from the ground up with Vietnamese help. But how did that impact their development?
Well, the KPRAF was heavily dependent on Vietnam for training equipment and even operational support. This raises an important question. Would internal factions emerge within the KPRAF as it matured and sought to assert more Cambodian control over its security?
And it's not just the KPRAF we need to consider. What about the role of militias and the widespread power of arrest during this period? It sounds like the lines between military and civilian life were blurred.
In a nation recovering from conflict and grappling with political instability, security was paramount. This often led to a blurring of lines between military and civilian life, with militias operating in many areas and the power of arrest being widely used. This had a profound impact on Cambodian society, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty for many.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into Cambodia. We started with the basics of geography and the near extinction of Cambodia in the 1800s. Then we journeyed through the complexities of the French colonial period, the rise and fall of the Khmer Rouge regime, and the challenges of rebuilding in the post-Khmer Rouge era. We explored the intricacies of the political landscape, the resilience of Cambodian culture, and the lingering security concerns in a nation struggling to find its footing. Where do we go from here?
Well, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve deeper into the political developments of the late 1980s and early 1990s. We'll explore the emergence of resistance groups, the complicated peace negotiations, the role of the UN, and the challenges of rebuilding a nation shattered by decades of conflict.
It sounds like we're about to enter an even more complex and fascinating chapter in Cambodian history. Stay tuned because there's so much more to uncover.
It's fascinating to consider that even after being ousted from power, the Khmer Rouge remained a potent force in Cambodia, regrouping and waging a guerrilla war from their strongholds in the western part of the country. Imagine going from being this brutal regime to rebels fighting against a Vietnamese occupation. What a complicated narrative.
It's mind-boggling. How were they able to attract recruits despite their horrific track record?
Well, it seems Cambodian nationalism played a key role. Many Cambodians, even those who had suffered tremendously under the Khmer Rouge, viewed the Vietnamese as invaders. The Khmer Rouge cleverly exploited this sentiment, portraying themselves as defenders of Cambodian sovereignty against a foreign power.
So they tapped into a deep-seated sense of national pride and resentment against foreign intervention? And they weren't the only resistance group active during this time. We mentioned the KPNLF led by Sun San. Emerging as a non-communist alternative.
The KPNLF, which stands for the Khmer People's National Liberation Front, positioned themselves as a non-communist alternative to both the Vietnamese-backed government and the Khmer Rouge. However, they faced their own internal struggles and leadership challenges. which hampered their effectiveness.
And then there's the return of King Sihanouk.
Yes.
He forms his own group, Pek,
right,
which stands for the Front National Uni pour un Cambodge indépendant, neutre, pacifique et coopératif.
Yes. Pek gained considerable legitimacy because of Sihanouk's royal lineage and his long history of advocating for Cambodian independence. So now you have this three-way struggle between the Vietnamese-backed government, the Khmer Rouge, and the non-communist resistance.
It's like a tangled web of alliances and rivalries.
Yes, it is.
And each group had their own international backers, right?
Right.
The Khmer Rouge receiving support from China, the KPNLF from the U.S. and some Asian countries, and Sihanouk playing his own diplomatic games.
Exactly.
You've got Cambodia became a stage for Cold War proxy conflicts.
It did.
With major powers vying for influence in this Southeast Asian nation. And as you can imagine, the Cambodian people were caught in the crossfire of these geopolitical struggles.
It's a heartbreaking reality of how international politics can impact the lives of ordinary people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But amidst all this conflict and division, these groups eventually realized they needed to work together to get the Vietnamese out and achieve some semblance of peace.
Exactly.
This led to the formation of a rather unlikely coalition, the CGDK.
Yes.
What does CGDK stand for?
CGDK stands for the Coalition Government of Democratic Kampuchea. Okay. It was formed in 1982.
All right.
And consisted of the Khmer Rouge,
Sun
San's KPNLF, and Sihanouk's Phano and Sihanouk.
Okay.
It was a fragile alliance born out of necessity.
Yeah.
Imagine the Khmer Rouge, Sun San, and Sihanouk all sitting down at the same table, trying to hammer out a power-sharing agreement.
It must have been incredibly tense.
It was.
And what was the Vietnamese response to this coalition?
Right.
I can't imagine they were thrilled about it.
The Vietnamese were indeed watching all of this unfold, knowing their grip on Cambodia was weakening.
Right.
They began withdrawing troops in the late 1980s.
Okay.
But they were also shrewdly making sure their allies in the PRK were in a strong position to maintain control.
So a calculated withdrawal, trying to ensure their interests were protected even as they left.
Exactly.
What happened to the PRK as the Vietnamese withdrew?
Yeah.
Did they just collapse?
Not exactly. They started reforming,
Okay,
trying to present a more moderate face to the world. They changed their name from the People's Republic of Kampuchea to the State of Cambodia.
Okay.
Adopted a new constitution, and even allowed some limited private enterprise.
So a bit of a rebranding effort to gain international legitimacy and distance themselves from their association with the Vietnamese.
Right.
It sounds like a pragmatic move to survive in a changing political landscape.
It was.
But was it enough?
It was a step in the right direction.
Okay.
But the political situation remained incredibly fragile. The CGDK was still out there, waging a low-level insurgency. And then there was the ever-present threat of the Khmer Rouge, who, despite being part of the CGDK, hadn't given up on regaining power.
Cambodia, in the late 1980s, was a nation in transition.
There was.
Balancing the need for peace and stability with the legacies of war and political division.
A delicate balancing act, indeed.
So we're seeing this transition from conflict towards a fragile peace process. What were the next steps in this process? How did they move from this shaky coalition and the Vietnamese withdrawal towards a more stable Cambodia?
Well, the next stage involved a lot of complex negotiations and the involvement of the United Nations. They played a crucial role in trying to broker a peace settlement and organize elections.
Okay, so the UN steps in.
Yeah.
I can imagine that wasn't a simple task.
It wasn't.
What were some of the key challenges they faced?
You're right. The UN's role was vital, but it was also incredibly challenging.
Right.
They had to find a way to disarm the various factions, repatriate hundreds of thousands of refugees, and create a framework for free and fair elections, all while navigating the political minefield of the Cold War, which was still simmering despite the Soviet Union's collapse.
It sounds like a logistical and political nightmare.
It was.
And on top of all that, they had to deal with the economic challenges facing Cambodia. Rebuilding the country after the Khmer Rouge and years of conflict must have been an overwhelming task.
Absolutely. Cambodia was starting from almost zero economically.
Wow.
They needed massive international aid just to get back on their feet.
Right.
Reconstruction was a long and arduous process.
Oh. But the Cambodian people, with the help of the international community, showed remarkable resilience.
Yeah.
They started rebuilding their infrastructure, reviving their agriculture, and even attracting some foreign investment.
So a glimmer of hope amidst the challenges. But I imagine the political situation remained volatile.
It did.
Even with the UN's involvement.
Yeah.
What about the Khmer Rouge?
Right.
Did they just cooperate with the peace process?
Unfortunately, not entirely. The Khmer Rouge, true to form, refused to cooperate fully with the peace process and continued to launch sporadic attacks. Their refusal to disarm and demobilize was a major obstacle to lasting peace.
Right.
And their legacy of brutality continued to haunt Cambodia, making it difficult to achieve true national reconciliation.
So the ghosts of the past were still very much present.
Yes.
Even as they were trying to build a new future.
Right.
But eventually, elections were held, right?
Yes, in 1993.
After years of negotiations and setbacks, Cambodia held its first democratic elections under UN supervision.
Wow.
It was a landmark moment, a sign that the country was finally turning a corner.
It's amazing that they managed to pull it off, considering all the obstacles they faced. But I'm guessing it wasn't a completely smooth process.
No.
Were there any issues with the elections?
You're right to be skeptical.
Okay.
Well, the elections were a major achievement. They weren't without their problems.
Okay.
F. Fun Sien Pech Sinok's party actually won the most votes.
Okay.
However, Hun Sen, the prime minister of the state of Cambodia, refused to accept defeat.
Oh, wow.
This led to a tense power-sharing agreement with a coalition government formed between Fun Sinak and Hun Sen's Cambodian People's Party.
So not a clean break from the past, then?
Not really.
It sounds like the echoes of Cambodia's turbulent history were still reverberating through this transition period.
That's a good way to put it. The ghosts of Cambodia's past continued to linger, influencing the political landscape, even as they attempted to build a new democratic system. But the elections were a significant step forward nonetheless, paving the way for a more stable and democratic future. And over the years, Cambodia has made progress in rebuilding its institutions, developing its economy, and even coming to terms with its tragic past.
It's an inspiring story of resilience and determination.
It is.
But also a reminder of the long-lasting scars of conflict. What were some of the key developments and challenges in the years after those first elections?
Well, in the years following the 1993 elections, Cambodia continued to grapple with the legacy of the Khmer Rouge. There were efforts to bring Khmer Rouge leaders to justice for their crimes against humanity, but the process was fraught with difficulties and political maneuvering.
So accountability for the atrocities of the Khmer Rouge era was a major issue.
It was.
What about the political landscape? Did the power-sharing agreement between Fun Sien Pech and the CPP hold?
It was a complex and often tense relationship. While they managed to coexist for a while, there were underlying tensions and power struggles. Hun Sen and the CPP gradually consolidated their grip on power. And by the late 1990s, they were the dominant force in Cambodian politics.
So a shift in the balance of power within this coalition government.
Yes.
What were some of the key factors that allowed Hun Sen and the CPP to solidify their control?
Well, they were quite adept at consolidating their control over key institutions, including the military and the security forces. They also effectively marginalized Fun Sien Pech and other opposition parties, limiting their influence and ability to challenge their rule.
So a combination of political maneuvering and control over key institutions.
Yes.
What about the economic front? We talked about the initial reconstruction efforts. Did those continue in the post-election period?
Yes. Economic development became a major focus for the government, especially as they sought to attract foreign investment and integrate Cambodia into the global economy. They implemented market-oriented reforms, encouraged private enterprise, and focused on sectors like tourism and garment manufacturing, which experienced significant growth.
So a shift towards a more market-driven economy?
It was.
But did everyone benefit from this economic growth?
That's an important point.
Were there any concerns about inequality or social problems emerging?
While Cambodia did experience economic growth, the benefits were not evenly distributed.
Okay.
Inequality widened, corruption remained a problem, and many ordinary Cambodians continued to struggle with poverty and lack of access to basic services.
Right.
There were also concerns about land grabbing, environmental degradation, and labor exploitation, particularly in the garment industry.
So a mixed bag in terms of economic and social progress.
It was.
It sounds like Cambodia was facing many of the classic challenges of developing nations trying to balance growth with equity and sustainability.
There were.
What about the political situation?
Yeah.
Did Hun Sen and the CPP face any significant challenges to their rule during this period?
They did face some challenges, particularly from opposition parties and civil society groups that criticized their authoritarian tendencies, human rights record, and suppression of dissent.
Okay.
But the CPP proved very effective at maintaining control, using a combination of political maneuvering, control over the media, and intimidation tactics to silence critics and maintain their grip on power.
Sounds like Cambodia was entering a period of one-party dominance, with the CPP firmly in control. But amidst all these political and economic developments, what about Cambodian society? How did ordinary Cambodians experience these years of transition and change?
Well, for many Cambodians, these years were a time of both hope and uncertainty. There was a sense of relief that the worst of the conflict was over. And there were opportunities for economic advancement. But there were also lingering anxieties about the past, concerns about inequality and corruption, and a yearning for greater political freedom and democratic participation.
So a complex mix of emotions and experiences for the Cambodian people.
It was.
And what about the international community's role during this period? Did they continue to be involved in Cambodia's affairs?
Yes. The international community remained engaged with Cambodia, providing aid, supporting development projects, and monitoring the political situation. But there were also criticisms of the government's human rights record and concerns about the erosion of democratic norms. Cambodia's relationship with the international community was and continues to be a complex one, marked by both cooperation and tension.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we've seen Cambodia navigate a complex transition from conflict to a fragile peace. The emergence of a multifaceted resistance movement. The involvement of the UN in brokering a peace settlement and organizing elections. And the challenges of rebuilding the nation, both economically and politically. We've also witnessed the rise of Hun Sen and the CPP as the dominant force in Cambodian politics. The country's engagement with the global economy and the ongoing struggles for democracy and human rights. What can we expect in the final part of our deep dive?
In the final part, we'll explore how Cambodia has navigated the 21st century, the continuing influence of Hun Sen and the CPP, the country's evolving relationship with China, and the enduring challenges facing Cambodian society, including poverty, inequality, and the quest for a more inclusive and democratic future.
It sounds like we're about to delve into the present-day realities and future prospects of this remarkable nation.
We are.
Stay with us as we continue our deep dive into the fascinating story of Cambodia. So we've seen Cambodia transition from conflict to a fragile peace and grapple with the challenges of rebuilding. We've witnessed the rise of Hun Sen and the CPP, and now I'm curious to explore how Cambodia has navigated the 21st century. What can you tell us about this period?
Well, the 21st century has been a period of significant change and continuity for Cambodia. On the one hand, the country has experienced impressive economic growth, particularly in sectors like tourism, garment manufacturing, and construction. This growth has been fueled by foreign investment, particularly from China, which has become a major economic partner for Cambodia.
So China's influence has grown considerably in recent decades.
It has.
How has that impacted Cambodia?
Well,
has it been a positive or negative development?
It's a complex relationship with both benefits and drawbacks. On the positive side, Chinese investment has helped to develop infrastructure,
Right.
create jobs, and boost economic growth.
Okay.
However, there are also concerns about Chinese influence over Cambodian politics,
Right.
the potential for debt traps, and the impact of Chinese-led development projects on local communities and the environment.
So a bit of a double-edged sword, as with many international relationships.
It is.
What about the political landscape?
Yeah.
Has Hun Sen and the CPP maintained their grip on power throughout this period?
Yes. Hun Sen has remained a dominant figure in Cambodian politics, becoming one of the world's longest-serving leaders.
Wow.
The CPP has consistently won elections, though often amidst accusations of irregularities and suppression of the opposition.
So the question of democratic legitimacy and political freedom remains a key issue in Cambodia.
It does.
Have there been any significant challenges to the CPP's rule in recent years?
There have been challenges primarily from opposition parties, civil society groups, and youth activists who have been increasingly vocal in demanding greater political freedom, respect for human rights, and an end to corruption.
So a push for greater democracy and accountability coming from within Cambodian society.
Yes.
How has the government responded to these challenges?
The government's response has been mixed. On the one hand, they have allowed some space for dissent and have engaged in limited reforms. However, they have also cracked down on opposition groups, restricted freedom of the press, and used legal means to silence critics.
So a balancing act between allowing some space for dissent while maintaining tight control over the political sphere.
Exactly.
It sounds like Cambodia is still grappling with the legacy of its authoritarian past.
It is.
Even as it strives for a more democratic future.
Yeah.
What about the economy? We mentioned the impressive economic growth fueled by foreign investment. But has everyone benefited from this growth?
That's a crucial question, and the answer is complex. While Cambodia has seen significant economic progress, the benefits have not been evenly distributed. Inequality remains a major challenge, with a growing gap between the rich and the poor. Corruption is also a persistent problem, undermining development efforts and eroding public trust.
So the classic challenges of growth versus equity and the corrosive effects of corruption.
Exactly.
What about the social landscape? How has Cambodian society been evolving in recent years?
Cambodian society is undergoing a dynamic transformation, driven by economic growth, urbanization, and exposure to global trends. There's a growing middle class, a vibrant youth culture, and increasing access to technology and information. However, traditional values and social structures also remain influential,
creating a fascinating blend of the old and the new.
It sounds like a society in flux, navigating the tensions between tradition and modernity.
It is.
What are some of the key challenges facing Cambodia as it looks to the future?
Cambodia faces a number of interconnected challenges, reducing poverty and inequality, strengthening democratic institutions and the rule of law, tackling corruption, promoting sustainable development, and managing its complex relationship with China.
A daunting list of challenges, to be sure. But has Cambodia shown any signs of progress in addressing these issues?
There have been positive developments, such as improvements in education and healthcare, efforts to promote environmental protection, and initiatives to empower women and marginalized communities. However, much work remains to be done to ensure that progress is inclusive and sustainable.
So a mix of hope and concern as Cambodia continues its journey in the 21st century.
It is.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
Revealing the complexities of Cambodia's history, politics, economy, and society. We've explored its ancient glories, its periods of darkness, its struggles for independence and democracy, and its remarkable resilience in the face of adversity. As we wrap up this episode, what's your final takeaway for our listeners?
My final takeaway is that Cambodia is a nation of immense potential, but also one that faces profound challenges. Understanding its past is essential to understanding its present and its future trajectory. And as Cambodia navigates the complexities of the 21st century, its people's determination, resilience, and commitment to building a more just and equitable society will be key to overcoming these challenges and achieving a brighter future.
A powerful reminder of the enduring human spirit and the importance of understanding the past to shape the future. Thank you for taking us on this incredible journey through Cambodia's story.
You're welcome.
It's been an eye-opening and thought-provoking experience for me.
Good.
And I'm sure for our listener as well.
I hope so.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Cambodia.
Yeah.
We hope you've gained a deeper understanding of this fascinating and complex nation. We encourage you to continue exploring Cambodia's story, its culture, and its people.
Yes.
And to stay engaged with the ongoing efforts to build a more peaceful, just, and prosperous future for all Cambodians.
I agree.